everybody, and welcome back to our continuing coverage of the International Remote Viewing Association Conference, coming to you from Menlo Park, California. Our guest in this segment, literally the only way to say it is legend in remote viewing. Dale Graff, he is the author of Tracks in the Psychic Wilderness, as well as River Dreams. He is a remote viewer himself. He is also former head of the Stargate Project.
That's correct.
And the Stargate Remote Viewing Team. So, interestingly, we were having this conversation last night over a drink. It's interesting to me how many physicists are involved in remote viewing. Like, almost every single person we have had on this show to talk about the topic of remote viewing is a physicist. And as I was saying, it's interesting to me that physicists have the openest mind of all when it comes to things like that. So as a physicist, as a aerospace expert, how did you get into remote viewing? Where was your branch from? I have studied aerospace engineering and physics, and this kind of seems interesting. How did that come about for you?
Well, I think that my interest in the topic goes back kind of far, back into childhood. I grew up on a farm in a remote area of Pennsylvania, close to nature, seasons, whatever. And in the area I grew up we were quite open to premonitions and intuitions, even though it was a Pennsylvania German environment. They were not exactly old school. They were open to these things. And I had a relative, they're descendant from Wales, and in that area, also they were open. So I had a cultural environment that was not negative. And in my own experience as a child, I would have dreams that seemed to kind of come true, but I couldn't be sure. So it was an early interest. But, I dropped that when I got to high school and college and didn't really pay much attention to any inner prompting. Now, I was drawn into aeronautical engineering because I liked the idea of flight, spirit, soaring. There's kind of a symbolic connection there. Sure. And then later I transitioned into physics because I wanted to be more looking at the more fundamental aspects, which I thought physics would provide, and it actually does. And when I took quantum physics courses, that was kind of mysterious and still is today. So going through that awareness that the reality we look at isn't exactly what we think it is. So that was an opening. So it sort of set my mindset to be receptive to these things in a way. But it wasn't until I had some really dramatic experiences that brought me around to say, hey, there's more to what I am receiving and more than what I'm called a person, me, than I can describe. And some of these were intuitive impressions that were very dramatic and led to finding people and things that I couldn't possibly have known about. So that opened me up to the whole process. And then I started reading the literature, what little there was, and discovered the Journal of Parapsychology in a library. I had never heard of J.B. Ryan before or the ESP research. So that kind of set me up for being open, plus the experiences that I had. So that's sort of how I got there.
Okay. And now, how did you get involved with Project Stargate?
Well, because I had these intuitions and very vivid dreams that actually were true. They were premonitions. They were precognitive dreams. And my study of the field, or what I could access at that time through the journals, I didn't know too many people in the research community at that time in early 1970. But as I started looking into this phenomenon, this area of study, I discovered work in the Soviet Union because my job at that time with the Foreign Technology Division in Dayton, Ohio, part of the Air Force, was to anticipate future Soviet developments in missile systems and also technologies. And I happened to come across some classified literature in my review of translated documents that we would get routinely that had to do with ESP research in the Soviet Union. I thought it was really fascinating.
Yeah.
And it was credible. It was in a technical journal. And I summarized that in about a 2-page little memo and included it in my annual reports or semi-annual reports to the director or to the chief of the Foreign Technology Division. He had to review all this before it was sent down to Congress and the Air Force. And I thought it would be ridiculed. I'm just adding this in sort of not as a joke, but to see, because I feel like doing it.
Yeah.
And the word came back from the front office that the commander would like to talk to me. Oh, what have I done wrong? But it turned out he was really interested in the topic of ESP. So, okay, I established a connection, and he asked me to keep him informed of any other data I might find on the topic from the Soviet Union. So, okay, so I continued on my reviews and work. And at that time, unbeknownst to me, I hadn't heard of this work before. Hal Puthoff and Russ Targ, who initiated remote viewing in 1972, the reason we're having this anniversary conference here, they actually were looking for funding. The organization that started them had discontinued, and they were going around the country looking for different military or whatever organizations, research, intelligence, that might have some extra funds laying around.
Yeah.
And they came to our place, and the commander in Dayton, Ohio, where Wright Patterson Air Force is, and they gave a presentation to Hal and Russ. And I was one of the few invited in to listen to it because the commander knew of my interest. So Hal and Russ gave the presentation. It was very dramatic about the results and all that, the statistics, and also the Pat Price material that you probably well known these days. And afterwards, there's some questions, and everybody looked skeptical. The other staff members weren't particularly ready to go with this. So after Hal and Russ left, behind closed doors, we had an open discussion. What do you really think of this stuff? Is it real? Or are they putting something over in us? So there was a debate. And eventually, I chimed in and said, yeah, I see some stuff in the Soviet Union that might be similar. So that sort of led the discussion to a decision. And the commander decided, okay, we will find some money, see if we can get it online in time. And you, pointing to me, become the contract manager of the SRI remote viewing research, continuing it. Okay, so that's how I got into the beginning. Well, it wasn't exactly the beginning, but it was 4 years after it was initiated. So this is 1976.
Yeah,
so
the beginning of the Stargate program.
And then, because Stargate, the word didn't exist at that time. Yeah. So now here I am. All of a sudden, we're traveling occasionally back and forth to monitor what we called a statement of work, which I carved out in conjunction with Hal and Russ. And off we went from the FTD, the Foreign Technology Division perspective, which was to look at what they were doing at SRI from 3 points of view. Could they continue to validate the phenomenon that they claimed they were finding, this thing called remote viewing?
Yeah.
Also, to help us out to evaluate the Soviet work that we would find. Did they find it credible research or not?
Yeah, to verify.
Yeah. It's just good looking.
Can we replicate it?
Yeah, could they replicate it, and could they tell from the way it was reported whether this was a credible researcher or not? That kind of thing. And the other aspect was, what can this do if it proves viable for the Air Force? And there were two major aspects to that. The Foreign Technology Division is basically an operational kind of unit. It's not research per se. That's a different bin of funding. So they're more operational and analytical, because that's what we were doing, analyzing data. So they were mainly interested in, can we find things like missing pilots, missing airplanes, missing objects? And there's evidence from what you might call the remote viewing tracking experiments that suggested, you can track people, you can find people.
Especially in those days, on the heels of the Cuban Missile Crisis, is this facility over here housing weapons like this?
Oh, that was another
like
aspect.
That?
Yeah, and it didn't have to be exact, but is there something in a silo or not?
Yeah.
That was the kind of question that loomed in the distance with our commander. And that's what I framed the statement work around. As best as we could tell, can we do these things to validate a potential for that kind of application?
Yeah.
So we just launched into the year and progressed nicely. We were able to do some basic work and replicate locally. And also at long distance, we actually had people from SRI do the traveling around, and we would then look at individuals that had the talent, how well can they describe where they are. So it developed a little, you might call it a little bit of a pool of information. Not enough for a statistical evaluation, but again, we weren't that interested, and I'm speaking about the overall perspective from them. In a very strict statistical proof. We figured that's either been done or it hasn't. Doesn't matter. There's enough evidence to say individual incidents are valuable in themselves.
Yes,
and that's how we launched ahead.
Even the fact of it, it's not that you want too much intelligence or data.
Yeah,
but any good, viable intelligence is good intelligence.
Yes, but remember, whatever we did, we always had to carry on for any analysis that this is a piece of the puzzle. No intelligence data source stands alone. So even if we were to perfect this to some degree, even though it's imperfect, or even if we thought it was perfect, it would never truly stand alone unless there was nothing else to do.
Well, and we did. Let's get into that for a minute, because some of of course, there are the protocols of remote viewing, controlled remote viewing, everything else, associative remote viewing, precognitive remote viewing. And as we said with Lynn Buchanan yesterday, and all the speckles of the spectrum of remote viewing in between.
There's a lot.
There's a lot. Exactly. A lot of titles.
Names, yes.
But the things that you guys were doing in Stargate, to know that you could give a person blind coordinates, literally blind coordinates from a map.
Okay.
And they could draw a floor plan.
Sure.
Yeah. That's phenomenal.
Yes. Now, going ahead then to get to Stargate, after several years at FTD, the program was actually canceled, and we might want to get back to that reason.
Oh, yeah, please.
But I'm going to jump ahead and just make this Stargate link. Okay, so I transferred to the Defense Intelligence Agency in Washington, D.C. to continue this work, and it was around the time when the Army set up a unit at Fort Meade to develop this, what we call the in-house viewing talent. So I was in two roles, and I continued to following the research, but I was also a liaison person to coordinate tasking between DIA and the Defense Intelligence Agency is the overall integrator of all military intelligence sources and units. So we had that management role at DIA, and that's what we were trying to do to not just specifically to manage, but to coordinate the activity.
Sure.
And in time, years later, this was 1981, and eventually I was actually transferred to the unit as the chief. Now, in that interval, there were different ways of describing or naming the unit because it was a special access program. So there were different names. It was given at Grill Flame, Center Lane, whatever. But these were only ways of controlling access. It didn't mean that this was a program. It was just the special access part that was controlled. And then later, when I became involved, I changed the name to Stargate. It was one of those intuitive feelings I had. It was not in the book of allocated code words that we had to use from the Department of Defense. I had to write a letter explaining why we wanted a different word that had to be approved by one of the undersecretaries of Defense.
Oh, wow.
So it wasn't just simply pulling a name out of
a
horribly sounding bunch of words, semantics or, all these crazy terms. So that was the latter part of the program. That's where the term Stargate came from. and it sort of retrofitted. We absorbed the previous, but Stargate at the time only referred to the operational unit itself. This the Stargate, whether it was the early Army or later when the Defense Intelligence Agency actually managed or took over the unit itself. That's why I got transferred into it. Because I was a DIA guy. Sure. Now all of a sudden, the whole unit is Defense Intelligence Agency. So here's the Stargate name, and it goes backwards in time and applies to most everything. The research itself was not a special access required activity. That was
really
not the research. It was secret, maybe a couple of top secret projects. The people could have access to our operational unit, as we call it.
Okay.
But the actual work was not in that label, mainly for security reasons. We were going to be doing projects that we wanted to keep in house, more or less.
Sure.
Yeah, and because of that ultimate kind of idea of developing an in-house people that already have the clearance, people that already had the blue suit or the Army suit on. At FTD, before I moved to Washington, D.C., I had actually found, or they found me, individuals that actually could do this real well. So I was already developing a unit, unofficial, within the Foreign Technology Division. But when this is one of those strange things that you can't truly explain, what was the basis for the Chief of Staff of the Air Force canceling our activity in 1981. Yeah. So, or 80. I think it was a series of things. I don't know if he had a particular dislike for the phenomenon. He could have. That happened with the Army unit years later, when the general that was actually responsible for the unit, another commander came in that just hated the stuff and just wiped it out. That's how it got transferred. Why it got transferred to the DIA.
Okay.
In fact, I'm the one that ended up writing all the new job descriptions and taking the package to Congress and whatever it was. So I was caught up in that paperwork nightmare to do that transfer. So they stayed in place in the Fort Meade unit that we had at Fort Meade. The DIA rented the facilities, so we're clean on that, and we just stayed in place. And I got moved into it. So that's just kind of a little history there, but that's the track record. Basically, nowadays, when people talk about the overall activity, it's Stargate sort of flows backwards, and everything is included in that. Even though technically speaking, there were separate pieces to Stargate. Sure. Yeah, and so it's just sort of a little bit of history there, just terminologies, maybe more than anything. But no, so that's really a quick run through of the Stargate and how it came about, and the double, and it actually Stargate. Now we think of it as a program all the way back, including everything, which is fine. It makes it easier to talk about. And I like that myself, since I'm the one that created the word.
You end up getting credit for SRI work and everything else.
Yeah,
Though you did oversee SRI research.
Yeah, and the thing about it is, I was really reluctant because it wasn't too long after Watergate, and I didn't want to have that association. Okay, we'll try it. We had a discussion around the table.
Why would they even have to break into the safe?
Oh, yeah, I know. So, okay, and then a year later comes this movie and book called The Stargate Conspiracy, written by some British authors. And it was independent, there was no connection between that evolving media presentation of the word Stargate and the word that I came up with. And that was sort of a funny thing. I had a long commute from the barracks, as I call it, at Fort Meade, after I was transferred there from our nice, beautiful building on Bowling Air Force Base. But I loved it there. Ugly looking. But inside it was nice, and I didn't care. It was a good cover. But I had a long commute, like 60 miles. So into Southern Maryland, where I was living, and coming through a swamp shortcut, and I'm driving along, going home, and the moon, I just happened to see an opening in a canopy, and there were these really neat little, it was very clear, which is odd in a humid area like Maryland. There's all these stars, like flashing down. Star. That's how I'm going through a gate here, in a swampy canopy. And I came back that morning and I suggested, hey, we were debating this for a couple of days, what word to use. And I said, let's think about the word Stargate. I like it. Don't you guys like it? And we kicked it around, and that's how it came about.
Wow.
So anyway, yeah, but that issue at the Air Force, I really had a lot going there in terms of people that had talent. And when the commander, the number one guy in the Air Force, canceled it, he killed everything. The foreign activity work that we were studying.
Wow.
The contract money, it was still not totally spent. So I got on the phone with Hal, and I said, you better hurry up with those statement of work items, because we're going to have to send you a stop order very soon.
Oh, wow.
And I just delayed the process. I put it in my round file. Okay,
right.
We'll get it done sometime, but not right now.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to protocols, when it comes to the methods of remote viewing, how does somebody find what works best for them? Because some people tend to be better cognitive remote viewers. Some people tend to be better associative remote viewers. You yourself, even like we were saying last night, most of your remote viewing work kind of falls in the realm of precognitive remote viewing.
Yeah, it's beginning to look like that.
Dream work, things like that.
Yeah. Well, you probably heard the talk by Jeffrey Mishlove yesterday. And his experience at SRI, it was identical to mine. It's just relaxed. There's no structure.
Yeah.
You just set a focus, and that's the way I entered it. And that's the way I prefer and continue to this day. Now, some individuals that don't have, they need to have a structure. And I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with the structure, but it can become bounding, But some people relate to that, and there may be a neurological process involved that's conducive to structure. Sure. I think the school is still out exactly, what is going on here. But the key in my mind is to focus on the objective. Now, there are lots of steps along the way you can take. You can have a ritual, and of course I mix dream work with remote viewing. But in dream work, it's a matter of just simply saying, I intend to experience this event or that future situation. Yeah. That's it. And my assumption with dream work is if my subconscious mind can eventually get to something in the future or halfway around the world, without me knowing how they do it, which I don't, then it also should be smart enough to figure out how to present the information.
Sure.
And some of my conditioning when I do it, I call it conditioning, it's not the right word, intentionality.
Sure.
Is not to have extraneous information. Just only want what's relevant. Now, many times, particularly in the research community, when you're doing a research project and they have comparative pictures and whatever, that's kind of where we get to ARE, which is it's a method within a method, so to speak. It's not the process. It's just a way of isolating the desired target. So when you do that, you tend to want to have a lot of information so that if a judge is trying to decide between two possibilities, it'll be easier when you have a lot of correct information as opposed to another picture that might be close in pieces, but not, hopefully not too close.
Sure,
you want to make them diverse. So the requirement there might be a little different than, say, in the operational kind of situation where you need to find a missing airplane, which is my favorite, because there you may only need a few key landmarks.
Yeah.
Or if you have a map drawing ability and can visualize maps, so get to the map thing, and we go from there. You don't need to fill in all the other pieces.
Now, can a remote viewer reverse the coordinate process? And instead of being provided coordinates and viewing a location, view a location and provide coordinates? So, kind of...
going backwards would be difficult. So I'm not aware of ever trying that.
Okay.
But I do want to make a few comments about the coordinates. We, at the Foreign Technology Division, at that time in the 60s and 70s, this is the home of where the satellite photographs were processed, before we got to digital technology, and that's something else. And we had a place in the back where this film would be brought in and processed. So we had a room full of photo interpreters that helped the analysts, decide what was, at this area, and maybe help interpret what the meaning of that symbol or that shadow was, for example. So we had people that I could walk up to almost any photo interpreter and give them a coordinate, and they'd probably tell you what's down there.
Yeah.
Not down to the detail, but close. So we didn't. It was generally agreed in FTD in the people that knew about the program, which was the contract, that we were using coordinates as a guide, sort of as a focusing technique. But do we really need coordinates? So we shifted away from that.
Okay.
And the thing about coordinates also was, I had an informal search project in 1976, actually, where the issue came up: how do you track an individual that's moving when there's you don't know where you can't give them a coordinate. You find this person is over there.
they are on the move.
Yeah, on the move. And that was, I think, the first realization that you don't really need coordinates.
Wow.
So we used an abstract method of, you need a focus. Early on, the idea behind a beacon person was, it sort of helps you, feel comfortable, maybe more psychological than anything, but kind of like a guide. Now, in the early...
it's something to lock onto.
Yeah, something that says,
a known quantitative.
Plausible model. It's a plausible concept.
And a known quantitative.
Yeah, and it's a friend of yours.
Yeah. It's something you already know how to dial into.
Yeah, and that does mix up the issue a little bit. Then somebody will say, well, you were having a telepathic connection. Well, there's nothing wrong with that.
Even still.
Yeah.
Even if so.
Yeah. So, in fact, we ran into that a large time. Well, that's only telepathy. What do you mean, only?
Yeah, exactly.
It did complicate the issue, and that's why we ran to the double blinding. And even did away with the beacon person concept.
Sure.
We did away, at least in our organization, with the coordinates. Now, even when the unit at Fort Meade continued with the coordinates, I didn't see anything wrong with it. But I also, in the back of my mind, realized this is not the coordinate. It's a way of, it could be a psychological thing. Oh, yeah, this will work, and I believe in it. And therefore, because you believe in it, I could have anything, it says, okay, this is a belief structure or image.
Yeah.
And some people have artifacts that none of us in the unit did, but some people that I know of would have some artifact that they would hold or a ritual to go through.
Sure.
Now, in a way to cool down, that's a term that Joe McMonigal used initially, which is sort of a form of relaxing, semi-meditation.
Yeah, decompression after.
Yeah, you're trying to get rid of a monkey mind, say. I know when I did this the first time here at SRI in 1976, in that first visit, I had to walk around a pond that's nearby SRI and look at the ducks swimming.
Yeah.
And that was a very soothing symbol for me. I grew up in a farm area.
Sure.
And the ducks floating in the pond was a very comfortable sense for me.
And familiar.
Child, I can relate to this fuzzy duck.
Yeah.
So for me, that's what really helped me shift away from my conscious anxieties.
Sure. And get into mode.
Yeah, get into the flow of things. Yeah.
And nowadays, of course, because of the work of the Monroe Institute, things like that, a lot of folks are using binaural beat music, things like that to get them into.
That would be interesting.
The brain sync.
I've only done that one time, gone through that. I'm not a full program, but somebody sent me some tapes one time.
Sure.
And, I found a very useful thing there.
I'd like to read a little something from your book here and ask you a question.
I probably won't remember it.
I just got. Well, the good thing is you're going to get to hear it again.
Okay, oh boy!
But I just got your book and was reading it. Got to about page 30 before you walked through the door, and I found this part interesting. This is from page 23. Over the years, remote viewing has shown that remote viewing is not limited by distance or time. Remote viewing is a natural phenomenon that can be experienced in varying degrees by anyone. Sketches and drawings are more reliable than the interpretation of the sketches. This one I found really interesting. Motivation and the perceived importance of the task are more important than any training approach.
Yes.
And remote viewing data contains a mix of valid information and error noise that can be reduced through practice and experience. Now, that fourth bullet point there, the motivation, because a couple times you brought up intention, especially speaking of dream work, even our conversation last night. Like I told you, when I did my dream work, I had a routine that I followed. I had a crystal castle that I built where I went and met my guide, and that was my meditation every night, was walking down the path to this place that I built in my mind, my little sanctuary, where anything was possible. And yes, with intention of finding an answer to this problem that I was encountering. Now, how do you instill that with a blind study? How do you instill that sense of importance?
It's tough. It's tough, but I think a lot of it is picked up not subliminally. You feel it.
Okay.
I had an example I wanted to get into the other day, but ran out of time. But where the individual is usually we're removed from the individual that actually has the need or has the individual in question. So there's a go-between, there's a liaison person like I was for many of the tasks. You listen to the individual. Here's what we need. Now, I'm still blind, but I can tell by listening to the individual, hey, this is really important to this person. Or there's a timing situation which almost tips you off. Then you got to really hurry on this one, so that's important. But in my case, I think I used intuition a lot to sense out importance. And I believe when that happened, I conveyed that to the individual that I then had to deal with. But in addition to my role, the other person actually set the task and asked the viewer can you go to so-and-so location or coordinate or something. If we're looking for a person, we went right for the name usually. Finds hostage so-and-so, because everything's in the press anyway, so you're not hiding anything.
Yeah, so I was going to say, you may want to bring
something
that.
like that. You know it's important. You absolutely know it's important.
Yeah.
You're finding somebody that might be killed. I'm losing this. Yeah, so that I felt that very strongly when I was directly involved in the search for General Dozier.
Okay, let's get into that real quick.
Yeah, now here's an example where it's beyond explanation. First of all, unless you want to invoke the concept of synchronicity and go into that direction.
Sure.
But where I was at that time, I had just transferred from the Air Force at Wright-Patterson to Washington, D.C. So I'm kind of a newbie for everything. And I just made connections with the emerging Fort Meade unit that had only been active for about a year or two. So I didn't really have any aspiration of being too directly involved in anything other than, carrying tasks back and forth from time to time. And there were other ways people were tasked. I was eventually assigned as the DIA representative for the intelligence community's task force for identifying projects or tasks for the remote viewing activity for me. So I had that role, but this is kind of before that. And I've always liked the idea of search and track. And I connected with Harold Sherman earlier on something else of a personal nature.
Sure.
And so I'm a new guy in town. And now here's this big thing about General Dozier has been abducted. This is December the 17th, 1981. And I'd only been there about a month or two, not even that. But I had this intense feeling. I really want to help find this, but I'm not in the loop. Too far. New guy, I'm not even connected directly at all, except occasional visit with the group. So I just had this feeling that I wanted to be associated with that search project. Even though our unit, DIA was not an operational unit, so there's no way technically that anybody would be sent from DIA to the field.
Sure. So
anyway, I went camping in the mountains of Pennsylvania. This is between Christmas and New Year, and it's snowing.
Wow.
And I'm in an entire hike in the snow. I'm repeating this thought. I really would like to be connected with the search in some way, maybe have dreams about the location or even being there, to help. And I have this, in the tent that night, it's snowing a little bit, and it's a little freezing, not too bad. I have this dream about being surrounded by German-speaking people around a big table, debating something German channel, and they did something, and I'm listening. I can understand German, but I never had a dream in German before.
Yeah.
So I end up feeling this is really unique. What does this mean? Now the general was abducted in Italy, so the search team that already had been sent from the Department of Defense was already in place. So I come back, and then a couple of other dreams happen, and that suggest that the information might be relevant to the general's location. So then comes the big snowstorm, and Washington, D.C. was locked down. On the TV and the radio, the announcement in the morning was only essential workers, like security people and fire people, come to town because of the 22-inch snowfall that paralyzed the city. At that time, I had an apartment very close to the building we were in Roslyn. This is before we moved into the new facility at Bowling Air Force Base. And, this is wonderful. I was taking a photography course. I wanted to get out and take some good black and whites, black and white film.
Sure.
So the only place open was a 7-Eleven. So I go there, get coffee. Then I had this incredible urge to go to the office. Now, there's nobody there except security guys. Okay? So why am I going to the office when I have a day off?
Yeah.
I'm dumb. So put my snow boots on and walked 7 or 8 minutes. And even the security guy was puzzled.
Yeah.
Are you here? I didn't tell him, I don't know why I'm here. So I figured, well, I'm here, so I'm going to just get caught up in some work. Half hour later, the phone rings in the chief's office down the hall. And, this is before we had this rotary stuff and whatever. It rang and rang and rang. I figured, well, I better answer it.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be somebody that wanted to know about remote viewing and whether it could be useful for finding General Dozier.
Wow.
And the call came from what was then the newly created, it was the colonel that was in charge of the newly created Army Delta Force unit in the Pentagon. He was calling our division chief because he had apparently heard enough about his interest, who had been a big supporter of remote viewing research, but he didn't know too much about the Fort Meade unit. But anyway, he called our division chief, who wasn't there. So I took the message. Yeah, I think I can answer some questions. I was a little cautious. Is this a real call or not?
Yeah.
So I said, yeah, I know something about this. He said, well, come to the Pentagon as soon as the metro is running. So, all right, half hour, maybe an hour later, the metro finally gets up to speed. I go to the Pentagon and go to the basement, and here's this unit, this newly formed unit. And so for the next 2 hours, I'm explaining the background of remote viewing, the history going way back, what the Fort Meade was about, and all that. And I knew it was legitimate.
Sure.
Had special. They had to clear me to get in there. So it was a classified, highly classified area. So it's just like an interrogation. They're just asking all these questions, background, my background, what I think of it, So I was very calm about it and just rolled through the whole process. And then they finally, another colonel came in and said, we'd like to send you to Italy to be part of the search team.
Wow.
What do you think of that?
That's pretty remarkable.
And the fact I didn't have to be at the office.
Yeah. Weren't even supposed to be at the office.
No. And had it not been there, the phone kept running, I never quit, wouldn't have done it. So anyway, a day and a half later, didn't even have a passport. So a day and a half later, I'm on my way to join the search team. So I got deeply involved in the activity in Vicenza, Italy, where the search team assembled at an army base there. And then for the remainder of the 40 days, I believe it was, that Dozier was held captive, I was involved in doing different things, helping to analyze the reports coming in, doing straightforward things, but also trying to coordinate what was coming out of the Fort Meade unit, because I did have a link set up there.
Yeah.
Even though that link froze up for some reason, and I couldn't get the information toward the end. But my own dream world spiked up, and I was able to actually have dreams about the situation Dozier was in. And even a dream that suggested he would be rescued alive. Rescued, period, alive. So based on an informer's information. But that came before the informer had been identified by the Italian police. So this is a really precognitive situation.
Wow.
How could my streaming mind or anybody's dreaming mind know?
Yeah.
The rescue was really tricky. It was seconds. They had to make sure that was the right apartment number.
Yep.
And disarm the 5 terrorists that are inside, and Dozier's in another room. And boom, they were in there. They knocked the guns out of their hands, and not a shot was fired, and Dozier was saved. But 2 days ahead, the dream suggested that would happen.
Wow.
So look at all the steps along the way, not my involvement only, but and at the subconscious level, how could the subconscious mind, anybody's subconscious mind really, not just me, I'm not special in that sense, get that information when it's such an incredibly tight timing life or death situation?
Yeah.
Everything had to be just right from the Italian police's actions.
Yeah,
those are the kind of things that stop you afterwards. You don't think about it when it's going on.
Sure.
But afterwards,
even the precision with which they have to do an operation like that, and to physically, you may want to bring that up in front of your mouth there. To physically have to know what rooms people are in when they're on the move. Yeah. It's incredible. Now, we have you for about another 5 minutes. I'd like to switch gears now and start talking about the modern movement of remote viewing.
Okay.
We've gone over its founding. We've gone over your work in between.
Sure.
Let's start talking about IRVA a little bit,
wonderful.
The International Remote Viewing Association.
Sure.
I'm a lifetime member because it's only through things like that this research gets funded. Yeah. So, and I am all about this research. Yeah. It's amazing work. What is the focus of IRVA? Its founding, and what are you guys looking to do for the future?
Okay. Well, initially, the founding fathers back in 1999, 2000, the vision was to have an organization that would be an educational unit to help people understand what remote viewing was about, provide a forum for dialogue, and just a comfortable place for people to learn more about the process, and even to identify and recommend or make available people that are there that are trainers. So we had that educational service that we provided. It's sort of basic. And this involved where we're becoming more involved in helping to identify research ideas.
Yeah.
And more recently, well, we actually in 2011 established the Collier Fund or award, $3,000 for anybody who would submit the best research proposal for remote viewing research and or anything related to that like they could accomplish within say a year or so. So we had this Collier Fund made available, and that was a successful thing. We've had about 6 or 7 of those awards, and we continue with that.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So these are really interesting projects, and there's people anywhere can submit, and people I never even thought about this too much. Of course, they can get assistance. There's always a statistical evaluation problem here, but we can alert people to where you can go to get help. So that's continuing, and I just through kicking off the most recent cycle that began earlier this year. So that's underway. So that part, but currently, or a couple of years ago, Deborah Katz and I started or initiated the IRVA Research Unit, the IRU. Okay. And we have a monthly meeting through Zoom where people can drop in, discuss ideas, ask for assistance or guidance where to go. So we have that going. And in the future then, as the vice president of the organization, I envision reaching out to educational institutions, not just simply saying, hey, we can provide education, come to us and ask us what it's about. We have a really extensive, nice website that tells you, leads you through a lot of possibilities, including a way to practice remote viewing, which is called the Focal Point that John Noble runs. So we have that function, that service. But I'm looking ahead to where IRVA can connect more directly with the academic world and with other research facilities.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's part of what you might call the educational arm, but on the other hand, it's also more of an integrating aspect where we want to be more active in hey, listen, we have this unit, we have this organization. We're talking about this phenomenon that's real, that anybody can do. When are you guys in psychology departments going to start listening to us? You go to a bookstore in the college area and go to a psych book, and you won't find too much about anything.
No, and that's just it. If you go anywhere and visit a parapsychological section, most of the stuff is about ghosts, things like that. It's not about this.
We're trying to stay focused here. Yeah. So yes, so that aspect, it's a researchable thing. It's repeatable. Yep. Oh, that's a big word. And
it is.
Some of the traditionalists will say it's not repeatable. They're wrong about that. But where is your if it's 100%? No, it's not repeatable. No. But all your medical world drugs and stuff is just not.
It's not 100% repeatable either.
So that's the sort of connection that I envision the unit IRVA moving toward, as well as one of my pet themes is like you had mentioned earlier. There's so many little threads here and paths there. Bringing that more. I don't want to say focus, but in a better understanding of how one connects to the other.
Well, and even having, especially with something like remote viewing, which once again can lead into a lot of communities.
Yes.
To have a focus for the remote viewing community, to have a standardized set of protocols for across the world.
Yes.
Where you can say you're doing a type of remote viewing, great, but if you're doing remote viewing, these are the protocols.
Yeah.
This is the steps.
Yeah.
Because once again, in order to maintain the scientific aspect, you've got to have the formula.
Yeah.
The formula is most important.
There are two aspects here. The scientific protocol, which is what applies to any laboratory in the world.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's a given, okay? And then there's that's within the step-to-step thing within that, which can vary. Vary. The structured part is really great, and our instructors that we have that connected with IRVA are really excellent at that, and they stay generally within that protocol, that procedure. And I'm not talking about the scientific part. That's a given. You have to do that. Now, there are other concepts involved here that we're trying to sort of look at and integrate into this because they don't follow the same step-by-step process. But they are still should be performed within the scientific umbrella.
Sure.
So, well, like what Jeffrey Mishlove described, what I described, you go to the SRI the first time, and then you have a really good rendering of the objective. Yeah, that's a basic way of doing it. And it doesn't follow the steps that Inga Swan developed. There's nothing wrong with that, but you have to put it in perspective. This is process A. Here's process B. Here's process C. Yeah. And as we're talking right now, Julia Mossbridge is giving a presentation of an approach, which is actually rather different from the step-to-step concept.
And that's just it. Once again, there are numerous spectrums within remote viewing and numerous techniques.
And that's what I would like to do in my tenure as a VP or whenever, is to find a way to express these different concepts.
Well, and to give them all an equal space within the community.
Yeah, right. And then somebody else can decide, or to try it and see what works for you. Now, I have to admit, the structured approach is very successful, and people can do that. And it gives you you don't have to jump right into it. You can go there and get there. And by the time you get through that process, you're very comfortable that you have actually caught something that relates to the target. Oh, I can remember looking at 15 to 20 pages of scripts from the people on the Stargate project, and looking at that and say, okay, where did you end up? Go back and give me a one-page summary. Yeah. So it's there, but only they can pick it out after all that. And usually it's toward the end anyway, so it develops that. So it's I don't want to say we're still learning. We really are.
Even 50 years for a science is young.
It's young. And what's encouraging to me is there really is an interest. Now, how far that interest goes, do they just look at it casually, read one of these books and say, that's interesting, and put it aside? Or can be motivated? Can there be a motivation here? There's a step beyond this. There's a step beyond this, which I'm not sure is there yet with the current instructions and instructors that we have. And that is, an individual that goes through what we call a training program, however the process within the scientific umbrella, where do they end up at the end of that? Is there other than describing beautiful distant scenes, what's the next step for the individual? What do you gain out of this on a personal level? Have you increased in some sensitivity? Are you more intuitive? Are you more alert and aware of your fellow human beings? So are you becoming more how can I say, humanistic in a way? So
none of these bad things.
No. So more compassionate. Understanding. At a fundamental level, it seems to me that, and others too, not just me, but when you get into this, even though that wasn't your objective in the beginning, you just want to be a good remote viewer because maybe you can solve a police case. Sure. Like but underneath that, you are uncovering something that ultimately it makes you realize, this is far greater than my subconscious. Where does this go? How do I relate to the universe. You become more cosmic thinking for most people. Now, people don't want to go there per se, but I think at a subconscious level, we're sort of drawn into the sense of connectivity. People, the animals, the plants, it's all one underlying phenomenon.
We are definitely hitting that zeitgeist with humanity right now, where people's minds are open to this concept now. Yeah, it's not nearly as an anathema to talk about.
Right.
As it once was. You don't nearly get the finger wag. You don't nearly get the fundamentalist view that a lot of people had about it for a long time.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to see organizations like IRVA forming.
Yeah.
I'm happy to see folks like yourself, Hal Puthoff, Russell Targ, Lynn Buchanan, really passing the torch on to the next realm of researchers, the next realm of remote viewers. It's a beautiful thing because it really is. It's a trade, you know. It really is that apprentice master relationship when it comes to a teacher and a student.
Sure.
So it's beautiful that you guys have formed this organization to make sure that that is preserved and still done.
Yes.
I want to thank you for that.
Oh, my goodness. That's great.
I also want to thank you for your years of research on this topic, your diligent work, as well as your time today. Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it.
Wow. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Before we let you go, let everybody on the camera know where they can go to pick up their copy of Tracks in the Psychic Wilderness, where they can go to pick up their copy of
River Dreams,
and where they can come to contact you for lessons, courses, anything like that.
Yes, I do have a website. I do have a contact on the website. What's my website?
What's my name?
I sometimes can't remember.
I can feel you.
Yeah. Okay, but just
DaleGraff.com.
There you are. Yeah, that'll work. Yeah. Yeah, Mountain Viewer at DaleGraff.com. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
so I can be found, and I'm not as active as I was years ago. I have other priorities right now.
Sure.
This is number one, but there are others that interfere or I need to pay attention to. In the summertime, I'm an active outdoor guy. That's it, you know.
Yeah, you were saying a canoer and everything else.
Yeah. So yes, my specialty right now is, in addition to remote viewing, is the dream state. Because I've been finding people really can relate to that, because not as a tool for becoming psychic. That happens anyway.
Sure. But
as a tool for self-understanding.
Yes.
Coming to grips with issues and problems.
Absolutely.
It's a wonderful tool for that.
I would love to have you back on to do a whole episode on just dream work.
Yeah, and I've done healing in dreams and
absolutely
and counseling.
It is
without even knowing.
It is a great way to find the root of traumas and to release the root of traumas.
Right. In fact, an issue came up here during this conference that I'll be working with somebody.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, once again, thank you for your many, many years of work. Okay. Thank you for your appearance today. While you were online checking out DaleGraff.com, make sure to stop on by CuriousRealm.com. That is where you can find all the episodes. It's where you can follow us on platforms. That's where you can find the Knowledge Vault. If you want the declassified documents from Project Stargate, CuriousRealm.com/knowledge, folks. Go to our declassified section, and you will find that. Alcubierre warp drive documents, all kinds of great stuff. We will be back after this with our continuing coverage of the International Remote Viewing Association Conference here in Menlo Park, California. Right after this, folks.
Wow.